Please do take your seat. We are going to get underway in just a moment. A very warm welcome to you all. Please do find a seat. We are going to get underway in just a few minutes. A very warm welcome to you all to ALT's 30th Annual Conference. I'm Maren Deepwell. For one more day, I'm still ALT CEO, but tomorrow that will all change, and I'm so thrilled to have that privilege to introduce our conference co-chairs for the very last time. But before we do the big intro, I wanted to also say a warm welcome for everybody who is joining us online and watching the live stream. We are the biggest audience since 2019 in person, and this is the biggest annual conference ALT has held since the pandemic. And if you are joining us from wherever you are watching the stream, you are just as welcome as those of us who are gently sweating and gently dripping here in Warwick in what is turning out to be a very, very sunny annual conference. Now, I'm very mindful that it is an extremely big privilege to be here in the room with you today, and I'm mindful that not everybody can be here with us. But this is a very joyful occasion, and I hope you're going to have 3 days to remember to be inspired by. Now, one of the things I found very difficult in the last few years when we were doing a lot of events online is to show appreciation and welcome and warmth and gratitude via emoji and via clapping online. So we're going to have a little exercise for which you're going to need your hands. So if you're holding devices, please get ready to use your feet, your hand, any other limb that can make noise. You can use your voice as well. So first of all, I'm going to ask all the participants who are watching us online to show their appreciation, to clap, to holler out wherever you are, and click the emojis and show your welcome. As you can hear, ladies and gentlemen, we need to do a little bit more work here today to amplify the voices of those who can't be with us in the room, who are desperately clicking the emoji at home. So just to have a little practice round, please show your appreciation and welcome here in the room. Thank you very much. Now, this was the practice round. In a moment, we are going to welcome our co-chairs to the stage to open this 30th annual conference of ALT, and I hope that we can do a lot better than that. So for the rest of you, please do put down phones and laptops, get your hands and feet, and get ready to welcome our co-chair team, Santanu and Laurie. Welcome.
Hello, good morning, welcome conference and to this Oculus auditorium. My name is Santanu Vasant. I'm one of the co-chairs. As of about 2 months ago, I'm the head of digital education and educational development at London Metropolitan University, and thank you for attending today, both in person here and to everyone watching online. Hopefully you have a very fruitful and insightful conference. We've got a great lineup of talks and presentations. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to my co-chair, Laurie Phipps.
Good morning. So I'm Laurie Phipps. I'm from JISC. Some of you might have heard of us. I'm really pleased to be here with Santanu, with Maren, with Billy, the rest of the ALT team who've made this possible. And I just wanted to say thank you for coming, especially on such a hot day. For all those people at home, I'd like to say hi to your cats. So, hi. Just very briefly, I'm just going to say, we sat down back in March, I think, and decided what the themes were going to be, and put a proposal into ALT about what we were going to talk about. The three themes at the bottom, the diversity and inclusion, sustainability, social justice, and those emerging technologies, are all things that we saw coming through during the pandemic, and before the pandemic, and after the pandemic, and things that are going to be happening for the next 5 to 10 years. So I guess the major theme, especially for the people that are here, is this leading people in a time of complexity. Not leading with technology, not leading with the latest thing. It's about how people in this room can actually show what we can do with the technology when we've got so many complex things that are happening. I hate to say the next pandemic. It's an awful thing to contemplate. But the people in this room made education happen during the last pandemic. And we need to recognize that and be ready for the next time. But also, it's September, and I'm wearing a jacket and wishing I had shorts on. You know, how are we going to cope as learning technologists, as learning designers, as people designing learning for a temperature that is constantly increasing? These are the complex things that we have to deal with in this room, and that's why we chose these themes. So, with that, it's...
A very warm welcome to everyone in person and online. We've got about 350 to 400 participants in total, which is one of our biggest audiences since the pandemic, and that's a real achievement for this time, post-pandemic. And we're hoping that we have a really great conference and kind of get people to really interact both online and in person. So we've got lots of channels in place, both on the social media channels and also Discord as well. If you've joined there, there's quite a lively channel there as well. And there's also the Alt radio station hosted by Don Pates happening across the 3 days at the conference. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over back to Maren for some interaction.
Thank you. Thank you, Santanu. Thank you, Laurie. They'll be back on stage in just a moment. But Santanu mentioned all kinds of ways to getting engaged online and in the audience. So I'm going to ask Fraser to come up now and introduce how you're going to get your voices heard today in this auditorium. So over to Fraser. A warm welcome.
Lovely stuff. Thank you very much, Maren. That was a very smooth transition as well, guys, into the interactivity element. So thank you very much. So yeah, first of all, folks, just want to say fantastic to be here today for what is the 30th anniversary of the ALT conference. It's actually only my second time attending one of these, but we've worked with ALT as an organization for quite a number of years now, so very fortunate to have a very good relationship with them. I'm quite sure most of you in here, or a good number of you at least anywhere, will have heard of VVox and who we are and what we're all about. But if not, essentially VVox is the #1 rated student engagement and response platform. Currently, we work with around 56 different institutions across the UK and internationally as well. And ultimately, the VVox platform, as you can now see on screen, is really designed to try and increase the interactivity and engagement element within the classroom. And we primarily do that through 3 main strands, which is live polling, Q&A, and then both synchronous and asynchronous quizzing. So hopefully you guys will see a good majority of those elements throughout the conference. We're using it in the main auditorium here throughout, as well as in some of the breakout sessions, I believe, as well. But I'm going to go ahead and stop talking now and pretty much let the product do the work. So what would be great, guys, is if you haven't already joined the session that we've set up for the conference, for the main auditorium session, that is, you can scan the QR code on screen now, and that will take you through directly into the session. Alternatively, you should have some printouts in front of you as well, hopefully also that has the ID for the session on as well. So I'll give you guys, just a couple of seconds to get set up there, and then we'll kick off with a few icebreaker polls. But yeah, please feel free as we're going through the different keynotes and presentation guides to actually use the VVox Q&A. Obviously, it's a fantastic resource to post any questions or comments that you may have, to the different speakers and things throughout the presentations and conference. So yeah, please do feel free to do that. I'll give maybe a couple more seconds. And I think if my colleague Ethan can go ahead and kick off the first poll that we've got set up. And very simply, this is asking everyone, what are you most looking forward to this year's ALTC23 conference? So please, guys, go ahead and tap in what it is you're most looking forward to. So I can see we've got networking coming up straight away there. Sun, yep, definitely. I think we've definitely got that one, so we can check that off. Lots of comments about networking. 90s coming up, absolutely fantastic theme. So really excited to see everyone's get up tomorrow night. So yeah, lots of things coming in, guys. So I'll give you guys some time to post a few more things in there. Definitely looks like networking is coming out as the number one. Inspiration, sharing experience. I like whoever posted cake. I'm definitely with you on that one. But yeah, it looks like someone's doing a first main talk for the first time as well. So yeah, some really great sort of things coming in here, guys. And like I say, it's such a fantastic event, and we feel very lucky and privileged to be able to attend and get involved with this in each year. So I think, Ethan, maybe give that a few more seconds, and then we can close that one off. And then we've got another quick question for you guys as well. I know there's obviously many of you joining online as well, so I'm just giving everyone an opportunity to have their say. But yeah, really nice looking work out there, guys. And obviously this is fantastic in a student environment as well for really kind of, breaking the ice, introducing, VVox for how it may potentially be used. But it's a very versatile tool in that respect. But fantastic. So we've closed that one off. So thank you very much, guys, for all of your comments on that one there. And I think we've just got one more question, Ethan. So let's go ahead and kick that one off. So obviously, given the fact that it is a 90s theme for this year, we're really intrigued to see what everyone's theme suggestion would be for a 90s theme song. So, Venga Boys, fantastic. Yeah, I've not thought of that one. We were actually talking between us earlier, thinking that actually it's quite a harder era to pin down in terms of specific sort of music. So, yeah, got some lots of things in there. Spice Girls for sure. We thought that one would come up. Achy Breaky Heart, very good, very good. Hammer Time, I like that one. Oasis, okay, interesting. Yeah, I've seen Oasis come. Macarena, ooh, that could be a good shout. I think you guys have got your work cut out there in terms of what we want to go for. Lots of great suggestions, but yeah, give that a couple more seconds. Really liking the suggestions there. Moving on up, Blink-182. I think the thing for me is always understanding what's on the verge of the 90s versus the 2000s. It's quite a hard era to pinpoint. But yeah, I think we can go ahead and close that off, Ethan, in a couple more seconds, and then we'll go ahead and hand back to Maren. But yeah, thanks very much, everyone. Please do feel free to come and say hello to us. We're here throughout the conference. We're located on stand 5 if you want to come and have a chat with us. Really looking forward to speaking to as many of you as we can, and enjoy a conference. Thank you very much.
So Santanu and I now have the privilege of thanking a whole lot of people who have worked hard to make this conference happen. And I think we're just switching back, perfect, to our slides. Yeah. So first of all, we want to say a huge thank you to our sponsors, particularly our headline sponsor, Inspira, from whom we'll be hearing in a moment, but also our theme sponsors. Do you want to give them a shout out?
So Echo360, Kaltura, PebblePad, and VVox. Thank you very much for your contributions today.
And one of the nicest things about having all of our partners here is that you can get hands-on experience, talk to the experts, the people who really in the know about what will make the difference when you go back to your institutions and to your desks next week. So we obviously encourage you to join us with the exhibition and all the hands-on experience that is on offer for these 3 days. So a big thank you to all of our exhibitors and partners who've made this event possible. Thank you. Do you want to introduce yourself?
Next up is Ishan from Inspira, who will be talking about Inspira. Would you like to come up, Ishan?
Well, good morning and welcome to all of you who are here and those of you online. I realise that when you hear there's a message from a sponsor, actually the last thing you want to hear is about us. And you can do that if you want to. You can hear about us by coming to our stand. So instead, I thought I'd use my time to think back over the last 30 years and perhaps try and look forward to where we might go. I too wish I was wearing shorts, but I think you're all quite safe that I'm not. Mainly because they're red like my shoes. I feel very welcome here because I saw, as I walked in, one of the first things is someone else wearing a pair of coloured Vans. It's not just me today who's feeling that they need to colour up their clothes slightly. But if I think back 30 years, that's 1993. And I was talking to my team and asking them about what they were doing 30 years ago and thinking about what I was doing. 30 years ago, 1993, one of the things that sticks out for me is that I went on a school trip to Russia with a fellow pupil called Robert Rinder, who some of you might know as Judge Rinder. We went to school together. That sticks out in my mind. I remember that someone in my family had a mobile phone. But I remember in terms of ed tech, probably the whizziest bit of tech, probably the computer that was in the rooms, but I was 15, I was at school. The whizziest bit of tech as far as I was concerned was the risograph machine, because this was fascinating to watch someone churn out all of these letters and think, where might the world go? Is it just going to be ink that sticks to your hands that you'll take home every night and you're supposed to hand it to your parents? I didn't actually ever do that. My mother likes to remind me on a regular basis that none of the letters ever got home. What I do remember is that I didn't like assessment. I was very much one of those people who thought, right, when I leave school and I finish university, that's it. No more education for me. I'm just done. And that was true for a bit. I was a lawyer for a bit. And then I went back into education and I taught on the bar course for a number of years. And so in that time, over these 30 years, I've been a student in 5 programs, I've taught on 2, and watched that education technology journey change. I did ask the rest of the team, and Harvey, who's our general manager, reminds me that he's not actually 30 until Sunday. So I was interested to see what he was going to wear for the 90s theme party. I will leave you to use your imagination as to what that might actually be. I was trying to think of what the themes are of where we might be going. And as I wrote down 3, I thought, well, hang on, but they're also where we've been. So let's look at those 3 and think about where they've been and where they might go. One of them was AI, and you're going to stop me at this point and say, how? How was AI 30 years ago? Well, I think 30 years ago we thought to ourselves, either imagine the world when computers did more things, or for those of you who've been around a little bit longer and are not 30 like Harvey on Saturday, you might have seen the infancy of AI. You may have had some idea of where it was going. I think it was that sort of idea of holding a 5.25-inch floppy disk, thinking one day I'll be able to hold a lot more on one of these disks, not necessarily thinking about the cloud. But where have we actually got to? Now that we have all of the generative AI that's made the news almost every day, if not every day, this year, we're almost, to quote that great educational philosopher, Beyoncé, at the stage of education, can you handle this? And it's not education alone, it's everyone else. We're at the stage of thinking, what do we do with this? Now that we've got it, where are we going? What might it do for us? And what might students do with it? And how might we use it? And the initial rush, I think it's probably fair to characterize, was worrying about how it might be used unfairly. But I think we've got past that. At the conferences that I've been to over the course of this year, certainly, people are moving well past that, and particularly communities like this, to think, but hang on, there's great possibilities and opportunities here, and it's not just people trying to get something written for them. The second theme was data. Now, was it about 15 years ago that data was the new oil? I think if that's true, then the use of data is the new data. Because much as we all talk about how we want more and more data, how do we get beyond that point of archive to use? Now, again, within this community, this is where we see the greatest use of the actual data that is provided, that we generate. And so this is a slightly different audience to normally, where I'm trying to suggest that we might move on slightly. I'm really interested to spend 3 days here and find out what people are doing, how they are actually moving this on and using all the data that's harvested for good. The third was accessibility, inclusion, diversity. I have a 16-year-old, so this is something that gets played back to me very heavily as to what a 16-year-old's view in education, starting their A-levels today, in fact, where they see this. What do they see as important? And I'm not sure that we're all necessarily in tune with what the students and us are all feeling in the same space, much as we try, because the latest crop of 16-year-olds have a slightly different view to those who are 21, and therefore up and downwards. But what I do know is that the education community, more so than any of the others I can think of, do more than just say they care about it. They really do. The initiatives that you see within education to make sure that it is accessible, inclusive and diverse have pervaded through time. These are not new themes. And so where does that have impact on education? I would say it's this community here who really are at the intersection of education and technology, as the name would suggest, who have the greatest ability to make a huge impact on where education goes, in part because you have on where it's been so far. I think certainly the days of vendors like me saying you should do X have to be over. You know that. You know what you need to do. In fact, we've probably said it because we've learned it from you. In fact, in order to meet those themes that were put up on the screen of leading people, diversity, inclusion, sustainability and social justice, and emerging and changing technology, it's about this community leading to make sure that happens in the way that it's always done. I thought Laurie's point that he made, that it's not about leading with the latest thing, is precisely where I find myself. It's not about the latest thing, it's about how it's used. And so what we hope to do, what we want to do, and how we want to engage with you, is to make sure that we are giving you the right technology to enable what you want to do, to ensure that your priorities are met and that you help shape where we go. This is not about technology leading education. It's the education being enabled by the emerging technology that we know about and don't know about, that will pervade through what we do now, will come through in where we go. So if you're around and you have a moment to chat and you want to get your sticker from the stand and do it by actually talking to me as well, which you don't have to do, you just come get the sticker if you want, we've got loads. I would really love to know what it is that you think the biggest challenges are going to be over the next couple of years and in 30 years, if you want to guess. I didn't try and take a guess because I don't know, but I'm really interested to hear what this community in particular thinks. So thank you very much for inviting us. We're delighted to be the headline sponsors of the event. I hope you are looking forward to 3 days of really insightful talks from various people. I know there's lots that I want to see, and thank you very much for listening.
Perfect timing and a wonderful message. So Santanu and I will give you a little bit more inspiration of what to expect over the next few days, and we might take it in turns and see what's happening. So I might just jump in. There is lots happening today on day one. If you've been on our guided run, has anybody in the room? I think at least one person has been on the guided run this morning. Dave White has been leading that for us, so kudos for everybody who got their trainers on this morning. I know our events manager, Katie, did 10K yesterday and was running this morning already, so I am full of admiration for her. We have an afternoon tea this afternoon by JISC at 3 o'clock, and then there is a drinks reception at 5:15, which I'm hoping will cool us all down. Santanu, over to you. What else is in store?
So we have a VR experience for people who haven't experienced VR already. There'll be some headsets for people to experience that, provided by Warwick University, the educational technology team there. So do try those out and see how those go for you.
Thank you. And that is just outside of the lecture theatre here on the left. Then we have a couple of housekeeping announcements. So there's no fire drill scheduled for the duration of the day. This building has exits to the front and to the side. In case of an emergency, please follow staff instructions and go across the road to the assembly point as quickly and safely as possible. We all know it's going to be a very hot few days, so there's water fountains located on all levels to the right and left of these exits and to the right and left downstairs in the same area. So please keep hydrated, and make use of the outside spaces to cool down as well. There have been a few last-minute program changes, so do have a look at the online program as well to make sure that you keep up to date in case anything has changed. Now, help is at hand.
So there's quite a lot of help on the website with various aspects there. So as you can see, there's help on accessibility and also various other bits and pieces there. So do have a look at the website there.
Thank you. And then we have also a lot in store today to explore the program. So you can scan the QR code on your badge for a quick way of getting onto the program. And two of the highlights we wanted to particularly make you aware of today is that there is a launch of the Trailblazer group for the Digital Learning Design Apprenticeship at 2 o'clock here in the main auditorium. This is your opportunity to meet the people who've shaped the apprenticeship. That is the first formally endorsed apprenticeship by ALT and a wonderful achievement for our community. And straight afterwards, there is another launch today of the Amplify V Communities of Practice Sector Audit Report. It's another wonderful piece of research that we're celebrating today here at the conference. So there is a lot coming up today, as well as the regular sessions. And what else is in store?
So we also have a Museum of ALT. Use the hashtag Museum of ALT on social media platforms. There's a room on the first floor here, 07, which has some of that and think back on some of the educational technology over the years. For those of you who've seen this development over the last few years, do have a look at that and do post your memories of technology that you used during the last 20, 30, 10, 5 years there. We also have a quiet and rest space. Dedicated quiet space. We ask you to respect the space in terms of being quiet there for that intended purpose. So just in case people find the socialization quite overwhelming, there's a space for you to go and to have a bit of quiet contemplation time and thinking time. Really important as well. We also have ALTC Radio, as I said earlier, hosted by Dominic Pates. There's various members of the committee and various people who've already been on the show this morning. When I came in, Julie Voss was there as one of the first guests. That's hosted by the Thursday Night Show.com. So do look at that. Do tune in there as well. So there's lots for you to engage with, both in terms of online, in-person, etc. And those people who are online do take breaks. Do take breaks from screen as well, and do keep hydrated as well wherever you're joining from. Thank you.
Oh, thank you very much. Thank you. Right. We now are going to switch gears a little bit because we have said our welcome. So before we start the introduction to our keynote speaker this morning, I just wanted to ask you one more time to take your hands, feet, and other anything that can make a noise, and just give one more welcome now that we're all in the room ready for our keynote. Thank you very much. Now, usually it is co-chair's privilege to introduce our distinguished speakers, but I've just slipped in there this year and bagged myself this introduction because our keynote speaker this morning is not only someone who I've learned from and admired a long time, but also a friend. And so I thought it would be a real privilege for me this morning to give the introduction. Now, there are a few people who don't know Anne-Marie, and I think you've seen her work at the University of Edinburgh and most recently at Athabasca University. Her work as chair of the board for the Open Apereo Foundation, also in the open source and open education community. There are few people in this building who can as knowledgeably and as authoritatively talk about the most technical of topics and the most ethical dilemmas while also rocking the shoe tweet scene. And I am very, very excited that we have her as our keynote. For those of you who joined us last year, you will know that Anne-Marie stood, at least virtually, on the stage for the second time at the Learning Technologist of the Year Awards. When her team won, she was in Edinburgh and helped accept that award for the University of Edinburgh. But last year, she won the Leadership Award of the Learning Technologist of the Year Awards. And at that point, we couldn't make it possible for her to be with us, and we had a heartfelt video message all the way from Canada at the time. So this year, the co-chairs extended an invitation that couldn't be ignored and got her here in person. And I hope that when you put your hands together, you will give some moments of thought, not only on the journey that's led to this keynote, but also how you would feel in her shoes, having to open this 30th annual conference on the first day. So no pressure at all. And I hope that when you put your hands together now, you'll put as much warmth and welcome in there and enthusiasm as you lean back and enjoy Anne-Marie Scott. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Maren, and not feeling the pressure at all. Thank you, everybody, for being here this morning. I'm deeply grateful and honoured to be asked to give this keynote because ALT is a really special organisation and a really special community. It's been a big part of my professional life. We won't go into how old I am, but I can see people in the audience today that I'm delighted to be able to call friends as well as colleagues, not just Maren. And to be here for the 30th anniversary and Maren's last ALT conference, that means a lot. When Laurie asked me to do this keynote, to talk about leading people in a time of complexity, he said, I know you've got a story to tell about the last few years. And I thought, oh boy, do I ever. And then I told him the story of the last few years, and he said, you're not going to be able to talk about half of that. And in fairness, about half of what I said was made of bad swear words, so he had a point. It's been a time. It's been an overwhelming and exhausting time with an excess of change and disruption, and it doesn't seem to let up. And I think a lot of us have had cause to reflect of late, to think about our work, our lives, the balances we're trying to strike between those two things, what's really important to us, our values, and how we live in them. Oh, and we wish things could be simpler. The title of this talk, Things Cannot Be Simple, comes from a Marina Warner quote. Creating simplicity often makes the heart leap. Order has been restored, the crooked made straight. But order is understanding that things cannot be made simple, that complexity reigns and must be accepted. Complexity reigns and must be accepted. It's not going to get simpler. Our futures are very uncertain and unpredictable. The themes of this conference that Laurie and Santanu talked about earlier, leading people in a time of complexity, diversity and inclusion, sustainability and social justice, these are the big societal issues that are ahead of all of us, not just for those of us in our room and in our work. And those challenges can feel huge and at times paralysing, and changing our path can feel impossible. I faced all of these challenges in the last 3.5 years. So I'm going to spend a little bit of time this morning sharing my stories with you, and from them reflect a little on the lessons that I've learned about leadership, in the hope that some of it has some use for some of you. Oop, has it moved? There we go. After all, the stories that we tell are important. And when we're walking in the dark woods, we need to keep looking for that path forward, holding out hope that there's going to be a bit of a happy ending. So whilst I'm going to talk about the pandemic and a few things that were hard, I also want to be clear this isn't intended to be a kind of trauma-sharing experience up the front here. Because as tough as the last few years have been, a lot of good work has been done and a lot of positive change has happened, and I really believe there's a lot to build on, and I feel quite hopeful about the future. Let's start with a bit about who I am and where I come from and why I'm here today. All good CMO portfolios start with a contextual statement after all. This is me, aged about 6, at Blair Drummond Safari Park in Scotland. That's the last known photo of my hair before it went grey, and also the fetching socks and sandals combination and the conspicuous lack of health and safety where those giraffes are concerned should tell you something about my age, roughly. This probably coincides with the time a home computer arrived in our house, because my mum was training to become a maths and computing teacher. And we had an Acorn Electron, then a BBC Micro, when everybody else had a ZX Spectrum. Dating myself again. Around this time, I learned some rudimentary coding skills in BASIC, mostly to write programs that generated insults from my brother and sister. But then things went quite sharply off the rails. Not long after that, I discovered the mobile library bus, and I spent the next 15 or so years in a book-induced haze, hitting rock bottom when I spent 4.5 years on an MA in English and Scottish Literature at Edinburgh. In truth, computers continue to be present in my home and my school life throughout all this period. I've grown up with this technology as it's moved through its infancy stages. And I was in the first cohort of students at Edinburgh to be given email addresses as standard. After graduation, I worked as a technical author for a few years, writing specifications, fitting manuals, help systems. And gradually I realised that writing about software that was difficult to write about is difficult to use. And I got interested in human-computer interaction. I also saw how technology pushed its way into industries, in this case the pub trade, and how that changed the skills people needed to do their jobs, and ultimately the kinds of jobs that were needed. I watched as old-school pub landlords felt stupid and incapable of doing what they thought their job was, how they resented the intrusion of technology into their workplace, how they felt they were no longer trusted to use their professional judgment, how they were now surveilled by stock control systems and clocking in and out of a bar terminal, how a job that they thought was about relationships with people became about efficiency and profit. I became horribly disillusioned with all of this, and so when a wave of redundancies came, I took the opportunity and fled back into the academy. Because it's not like that at all, is it? I spent just a little under 2 decades working at the University of Edinburgh and blossomed into the learning technologist I was always destined to be. I was in the first cohort of what is now the MSc in Digital Education at Edinburgh. I took on my first management role in 2007, and by the time I left on December 31st, 2019, I was Deputy Director of Learning, Teaching and Web Services. And if any of you know my wonderful colleagues at Edinburgh, and there's a few here today, you know just how good they are and what an amazing place it is. I've done some other things in that time too. Maren hinted at it a little bit. I'm the board chair of the Apereo Foundation, supporting and advocating for open source software in education. I'm also on the board of the Open Source Initiative, who steward the global definition of open source software. And right now, we're working on developing a similar definition for open source artificial intelligence. And it's a really vital and fascinating piece of work that I'd encourage you to go and learn more about. I'll skip the bit about working for 20 years for historic building preservation charities, supporting women in the tech sector in Edinburgh. Suffice to say, I have some weird hobbies. I've been on the leadership team of something called the Open ATC since 2018. We provide a set of shared open educational technology platforms for the post-secondary system in British Columbia, but we run them along platform cooperative principles, so shared, not paying for a service, essentially, shared ownership. And since 2022, I've been a member of the British Columbian Government's Digital Learning Advisory Committee, looking at how to scale up and embed digital learning post-pandemic across the whole of the province. On the 7th of January 2020, so after leaving Edinburgh at the end of December, I stepped on a plane at Edinburgh Airport with 4 large bags in the hold, heading off to take up a job as Deputy Provost at Athabasca University in Alberta, Canada. For those of you who don't know Athabasca, it's the 5th largest university in Canada. It's roughly the equivalent to the UK Open University in that it's an online distance-based university. So academic staff located across Canada and administrative staff based largely in Edmonton, Calgary and the town of Athabasca. It gets the lowest percentage of government funding in the province and I would argue has the students with the most complex needs. My job was to run the Office of the Registrar and Learner Support Services and to lead a massive digital transformation initiative called the Integrated Learning Environment. The ILE is a people and process and technology transformation project that touches on almost every single part of the institution, every learning, teaching and student administration activity. And at its core is a huge VLE transformation and a renewal of the entire student administration system, so it's not a small piece of work. January 2020. We had no idea. At the end of March 2020, 10 weeks into the role, I dragged the dining table in my partially furnished apartment into an empty spare room. I emptied my new office of all IT equipment. Whew, I thought I would get through this without crying. And with my peers and my new teams, we started the job of flipping the administration of the institution into a remote distributed workforce, mostly in northern Alberta with poor internet connectivity. We learned a lot about digital skills gaps. I became the lead for the academic side of the institution in our COVID response team. Many years of business continuity work and major incident work at Edinburgh really stood me in good stead. We took advice from our Faculty of Health Disciplines and dug in for the long term. This wasn't going to be over quickly, and we made changes that would hold us steady, keep people safe, and allow our staff and students to cope with lives that were suddenly much more complex. As you can probably tell, it was the most effective, rapid induction into a new institution that I've ever had, and it will probably take me some years to recover from. Along with coping with the pandemic, we continue to work on the large digital transformation project, the ILE. The pandemic only further heightened the strain that was already evident in legacy systems and the large amounts of technical and process debt that we had. People and systems were being pushed to absolute breaking point. This was tough work to do as a newcomer, and in October 2020, I moved to Kamloops, British Columbia, as I already had friends there. Nobody wants to make new friends in a pandemic, as it turns out. You may have heard of Kamloops, British Columbia, or, more accurately, to Kamloops to Secwepemc, within Secwepemcúlecw, the traditional and unceded territories of the Secwepemc people. The legacy of colonialism is impossible to ignore, though some give it their very best. And progress towards the 94 calls to action from the Canadian Truth and Reconciliation Commission remains slow. For anyone who's unaware of the history of the residential schools in Canada, go and educate yourself, and you will better understand the connections between Canada and the UK and our shared decolonisation challenge. If the pandemic was already highlighting existing inequities, this was a stark reminder that those inequities are structural, intergenerational, and that education systems have a difficult and traumatic history. Universities in Canada are at various stages on their path towards decolonisation and conciliation. And I use conciliation, not reconciliation, intentionally. As Maria Campbell, my elder in residence at Athabasca University, said, "You cannot reconcile a relationship that has never existed. There is no good time to which we are going back." This is hard and urgent work, but it can't be rushed. What's taken generations to do will take a lot of time and conversation to undo. The discoveries in Kamloops sparked much-needed conversations inside education systems in Canada, and Athabasca was no exception. We started to be more aware of the ways in which structural inequities manifest inside the institution. Students who don't have medical documentation to back up a disability grant application because when they grew up, going to a doctor wasn't the safe thing to do. Curriculum that reflects a Eurocentric view of knowledge in the world. How few Indigenous colleagues and staff we work alongside. Go back. As the pandemic dragged on, we announced our near virtual project, formalising the move to a remote distributed workforce for administrative staff. As I said, academics had been for a while already. This allowed us to recruit more staff from across the province of Alberta and beyond, especially important in a competitive digital market, many more people looking for hybrid or remote working jobs. This is unsettling for many staff, and it implied significant changes in organisational culture, process and technology, as well as work location. In April 2021, Neil Facina, the president of Athabasca, resigned, moved to Okanagan College, and our chief financial officer, Deb Myers, stepped into an interim president role. We learned 2 new phrases in 2021 as well. The first was heat dome. As the temperatures in the Pacific Northwest spiked, setting new all-time records for Canada and burning the town of Lytton to the ground. BC had the 3rd worst fire season on record. The worst ever is happening right now. The 3 largest fires in BC were burning around the city I lived in. I worked with the sound of helicopters overhead every day, bucketing fires and transporting heavy equipment. The smoke was constant and dangerous to breathe for about 3 months. New weather systems rose up from the biggest fires, causing dry lightning storms that sparked yet more fires. Ash and burned pine needles fell on my car every day. The smoke drifted clear across the Rockies, 800 kilometres, to my colleagues in Alberta. The second phrase we learned was atmospheric river. After the fires died down, record-setting rainfall hit the lower mainland of British Columbia, wiping out all 4 highways that connect Vancouver to the rest of the province, devastating large farming regions and causing whole towns to be evacuated. Colleagues who were coming over from Alberta to visit family brought me groceries because supply chains were interrupted. Staff and students living in these regions were obviously impacted, not just me. And as a result of the devastating fires in Fort McMurray in Alberta in 2016, we already had student bursaries for anyone affected by natural disasters. We had to use them every year I was at Athabasca. This is what the new normal looks like. There is no escaping the visceral reality of the climate emergency in this region of the world. The impacts are a daily topic of conversation. In January 2022, our new president, Peter Scott, joined. His arrival coincided with a groundswell of concern about the potential impact of the near virtual project on the town of Athabasca. Worries included the potential for the loss of jobs in the town, people relocating, recruiting people in new locations. By May 2022, concerns had been presented to the provincial government. They were sympathetic, and they proposed to use performance-based funding to incentivise more jobs to be based back in the town. I'm not going to go into the gory details because it's been really well documented in the press from all angles. Suffice to say that we entered a period of around 6 months of incredibly tense relations with the provincial government and significant changes in our board of governors. The whole situation created weird tensions inside the institution along political, union and personal lines. The stress was palpable on a very human level. I had colleagues break down and cry in front of me because they were scared for the jobs and the impact on family life if they were forced to relocate. And we had strong conversations about Canada's rather unsavoury history of forced relocation of people from their homes and land. Spring of 2022 also saw a difficult collective agreement negotiation with the Faculty Association reach an impasse, and work towards preparing for strike lockout began. For 8 tense weeks, almost all other work was dropped in order to focus on business continuity planning, amongst very fractious labour relations that again created lots of stress and tension amongst colleagues. Of course, the pandemic continued, as it does today, throughout this period, and like every other university, enrolments were incredibly volatile. As an institution that receives a very low proportion of funding from the government, Athabasca is much more heavily dependent on tuition income. So this creates a lot of volatility in budgets and financial planning. In addition to continuing to work through negotiations with the provincial government on the location of our staff, we had to do a lot of planning for various challenging financial scenarios that might play out. I had to lead a relatively inexperienced management team through this exercise, looking for cost savings, efficiencies, and those much harder questions about what we might need to just stop doing and what that meant for students and for staff. We got to the end of 2022. And in December, finally settled a new funding agreement with the provincial government, settled a proposed budget to go to the board for approval in January 2023. In January 2023, the new board of governors decided that they wanted new leadership for the institution. And on the 1st of February, Peter Scott was removed as president and replaced. 5 hours before that news came, like a bolt out of the blue, I'd handed my resignation in, with the intention to come home and take some time out. I arrived home at the end of March, and since then I've been giving my time to work with Apereo on the impact of new cyber resilience legislation in the EU, amongst other things. Like I said, I have weird hobbies. As of the 1st of August, I'm back working for Athabasca as a contractor. So that's global pandemic, climate crisis, labour disruption, difficult government relations, huge digital transformation, budgetary pressures, 4 presidents in 3 years, and grappling with the grimmest realities of the Canadian residential schools. It's tiring just recounting everything that's happened, and I'm sorry if you feel tired now you've had to listen to that. As a senior leader, I had a responsibility to guide teams of colleagues and peers across the institution through all of this, often with very little historical knowledge to go on. So how do you lead people when you've got all of these conflicting things, many of them that feel overwhelming and impossible to move? And how do you keep moving forward when change feels impossible? And when you don't have a lot of resources, how do you ensure that the little bit you have moves the needle most? So I'm going to talk a little bit about what I think I learned and the leadership practices that served me well. And I could give multiple examples for all of them, but I've only got 40 minutes. So I'm going to try and keep it brief, but if there are things you want to know more about or examples you want to ask me about, hit me up in the Q&A or come find me later. The first thing is to accept that complexity. Be clear that things can't be made easier sometimes. Be clear that things can't be changed sometimes, and be okay with not knowing the answers. Because you can also be clear that if things are complex and futures are uncertain, then nothing is predetermined. There's space to act in that uncertainty. So even if you don't know the answers or have guidance to offer your teams, make space for people to speak and be heard. Because knowing their concerns in advance will help if there is an opportunity to change things or to represent them. Tell them that and thank them for sharing. Find your guiding stars, find your visions for the future, however small and however temporary, because they're a thing to aim for and they can narrow down an overwhelming field of possible choices. What does a good outcome look like in the circumstances? Imagine multiple futures. Change is coming. How might we deal with it? How can we shape it? Make multiple plans, do scenario planning. They won't be perfect, but you won't be starting from scratch when things start to move. Hold on to hope and do everything you can to just reduce the fear factor for people. It was something we did a lot while we were planning for labour disruption. I couldn't share the detailed plans with my staff or student unions, and a lot of colleagues felt really conflicted about, helping management as it was. So we just held space to talk about things we were worried about: the impact on students, the impact on colleagues, communications gaps, financial impacts on the university and on individuals. Being able to feed that information into scenario planning or communications was useful for me. But the more important aspect was to create a respectful, ethical space where we could recognise that we had a state of difference and divide. But there was going to be a place after this where we all came back to work together. And that was a vision for the future that we needed to keep in mind and work towards. The next one, pick the priorities. We say this one all the time, but it can be the hardest to do because everything feels important. It takes a certain level of confidence to let things drop in favour of others, because someone is always going to haul you up for not prioritising the thing that they want most. You need to reframe your ideas of what success looks like. It is not about pleasing everybody. Accept as inevitable that someone is going to have a strong opinion about your choices. I find it useful to think about where work will have the most impact. If we have limited means and resources, then where can we move the needle most? As I say, this isn't about making the largest number of people happy. I can think of plenty of examples where we make loads of people happy, but we change nothing about the status quo. Obviously, there are always going to be pieces of work that need to be done for political or strategic purposes. So also think about what your line management might see as a dropped ball. Maybe even ask them. And most of all, prioritise the time to quantify the impact of the choices that you make, because this is how you will know and demonstrate that you made the right choices, or know and own when you didn't. And over time, that's going to build you trust, and you're going to need that. Most of Athabasca students are mature students combining study with work, and most also have caring responsibilities. There was a concern that we'd start to see a wave of dropouts for students for whom education was already a bit of a struggle, but also vitally important for their futures. So I asked my office, the registrar, what students needed right now, and their answer was the gift of time. So we authorised free 2-month course extensions for any student that needed one. We use a continuous enrolment model for undergraduate teaching, and allowed anyone in a frontline job to take an interruption to studies, so nurses, military, key workers. Money was a pretty close second, so we established our first ever emergency bursary scheme, worked in partnership with 2 student unions to fundraise, faculties donated their unspent travel budgets, and we dispersed around $440,000 in $1,000 bursaries. The thank you notes we received nearly broke us. We didn't see a wave of dropouts. In the first 2 years of the pandemic, enrolments went up by nearly 10%. So pick the priority. Where can we move the needle? What will have the largest impact? $1,000 didn't seem like an awful lot, but as I say, the thank you notes made it really clear that it made the difference. It bought people rent, groceries, baby milk, childcare, basic stuff. Take one step at a time. When the path ahead isn't clear, or the circumstances are overwhelming, or the outcomes are uncertain, making a fully formed plan can feel impossible. So planning for multiple scenarios is a good approach, as I already touched on. But you can disappear into it and never actually move forward. And in a crisis, you may just not have the time. You also need to leave a little bit of space for the unexpected. This is where I find adjacent possible thinking useful. This term's coined by the biologist Stuart Kaufman, but it's spread beyond that field as a way of thinking about activities that evolve. Essentially, you can't change a whole system in one go, but by making a move, you can change some of the parameters, what's possible now. And when you do, that opens up a new set of pathways. It requires you to be comfy with not having a complete plan all the time. Maybe you have a thing to aim at, know the first few steps, but not the whole roadmap. That's okay. That's how learning happens. How am I doing for time, Maren? 10 minutes. Okay, I'll skip that and speed up. Okay. Take the small wins. Sometimes we think that the changes we make are so small as to be a drop in the ocean. What's the point? We're barely scratching the surface. This is where we have to reframe our thinking again and see ourselves as part of a much larger picture. I find Adrienne Marie Brown's thinking really helpful here. She talks about change-making work as emergent and fractal-like. Lots of work at small scale, which together builds up in repeating patterns to a much bigger change. And I really like that she recognises that the learning that takes place in those small-scale changes is what builds capacity in the system overall. I've talked about the emergency bursaries that we set up at Athabasca at the start of the pandemic. And there was some concern about not being able to support everyone who needed help that made some colleagues really wary of proceeding. What if we disappoint people, essentially? In the end, we satisfied about 30% of need with those bursaries. But on the basis of having demonstrated that need, around another $1 million was added to our budget the following year as a one-time windfall. As well as supporting more students through more emergency bursaries, we were able to create an Indigenous First Start bursary. We again demonstrated that there was need. And so even though the extra $1 million was one-time money, we went on to repurpose an underutilised leadership bursary into an ongoing permanent bursary for Indigenous students. So it's a good example of small changes, repeating, building up to a bigger and more permanent and structural change, with us learning at each point in that process. I hope you're starting to see how a number of these things knit together. Once you've accepted complexity, you can focus on picking the priorities. And you can pick a priority that moves the needle. You can take a step at a time, and you can build on those small wins, repeating that pattern over and over and over again. Which begs another question, I think. How do you help people keep going in this work? First off, you measure the distance travelled. When you're in the thick of it, progress is really hard to see, and you're often not aware of the work that your colleagues are doing. It really can feel like you're grinding away with no end in sight. As a leader, make the time to gather up the work done and reflect it back. Make lists. Get your team to help contribute to the lists, because they probably know about things you don't. Make explicit the links between people's work and the big picture. Help them see how they contribute, and bake in feedback if you have it. Thank your teams and colleagues for their work, their support, and its impact. And I'm mentioning colleagues explicitly because we work in communities. Someone who gave you feedback or proposed an idea or expressed some support is just as much a part of getting the work done as the team who knuckled down and got it out there. Share those lists upwards and outwards too. Build a sure-footedness in progress as well as sustaining people on the path. And remember to celebrate the wins. Perhaps even prioritise a little time to apply for awards. And I believe there are some really excellent ones available for learning technology work. And I'm looking forward to whooping and cheering with everybody tomorrow night. Now we come to what I think of as the core of my leadership practice. Build resilience, lead by developing others. My job as a leader is to create the conditions in which everyone else can do their best work. I don't need to know how to do everything, and I don't need to be the smartest person in the room. If I think I can do the work of 30 or 50 or 150 people, then I should never hold a leadership position again in my life. My job is to embrace diversity in every sense of that word and to use it as a superpower. How do I find and bring together the people who have the wide variety of knowledge and perspectives needed to work out the best way forward? And that includes students, by the way. And how do I ensure they have the skills and the resources they need to get the job done? How can I support them and invite them to take risks? So I think about teams of teams or matrix working type arrangements. You won't always find who you need inside your own teams. So you need to be able to work your organisational culture and bring in others too. You need to help build an organisation that in the face of challenge doesn't freak out because they don't know the answers. They ask, change is coming. Who do we need in the room to deal with it? And my job is also to make sure that each time we do this, we build. Doing the work together should change us. We should have built new relationships with our peers. We should have built new knowledge, new networks, community, and resilience. Help teams and colleagues to build that connective tissue, the networks between people that live below the surface of the organisational chart, the networks between peers and colleagues that organisations like ALT facilitate. I think one of my biggest successes as a leader was that I built a team at Edinburgh that I walked away from in 2019 and nothing bad happened. My deputy stepped neatly into my job, and 10 weeks later, they were part of that enormous effort we all went through to flip our institutions. And they didn't stumble. Okay, nearly there, my final point. No need for heroes. During all the time that I told you about, my health wasn't great, and my dad was dying of Parkinson's. I hope you've heard a lot today about supporting people and about leadership as a practice of care, because it's certainly what I believe in. So when I got to January 2023, I knew I needed to take a break, and I stepped away, visibly and explicitly putting caring for myself first, taking some time out to refuel and refocus. I'm not done, not by a long chalk, but that's the final thing I learned. Know when it's not your time to lead anymore. And if you've done all the other things I've talked about, you're going to be able to step away safely. Don't be a hero. I've shared a personal story about some difficult years, but as I said at the start, this isn't about sharing trauma. This is about sharing what worked and what got good work done, what moved us forward to a new place, however hard it was, and what I hope could do the same for all of you. And I'm sharing it because in a time when the words digital transformation are on everyone's lips, I also really want to emphasise that people are the real infrastructure of our institutions. This talk is about leading people in a time of complexity, as Laurie emphasised at the start. In a career spanning more than 2 decades and a life spanning a few more, I've seen technologies come and go, and they change. They'll continue to do so. People are where we're going to see continuity and adaptability. People are the real engine of transformational change in our institutions, not the digital. People like us, learning technologists, are the ones who are going to inform, shape, and shepherd the digital change in our institutions and support our communities as we do. Universities are people. And this quote comes from a book which is due to be released soon, later this year, Higher Education for Good. And it's a closing piece from Raewyn Connell. But if you are not, the book will be open access, by the way, when it's published. If you're not aware of Raewyn Connell's work, find a copy of The Good University and have a look at that. She talks about universities as collections of labour, which I find a really useful and comforting thought. So yeah, universities are people. So I'm going to end and say, go and enjoy the next 3 days. Hopefully this hasn't put your start to the conference on a total bummer. Listen to the stories of colleagues working on the big challenges that face us and celebrate with them that joy in moving the needle even just a little bit. Meet new people, make connections, hear what others are finding challenging. Dream up wild ideas of what the future could be, and then make plans for working to get there. Build that resilience in our community in the face of that inevitable and unrelenting complexity. And as big and as overwhelming as the themes of this conference might feel, recognise that the sum total of all of the pieces you're going to learn about, all the pieces of work you will learn about over the next 3 days, adds up to a very large amount of change and progress. And this is why I'm hopeful. Thank you. Mostly held my shit together.
Thank you so much for such an inspiring talk. We can see the comments coming in, and I think there's deep appreciation online and in the room for all the issues you've raised and all the difficult things that you've highlighted that we're grappling with. We are going to bring up the comments on the screen now, and I'm going to pick a few as we've kindly left enough question time. So first of all, obviously not just a question, but an amazing, insightful and personal keynote. So thank you so much for that comment, and please keep them going. We're just going to pick one, and I think this one is maybe the one we're going to start with. So Anne-Marie, you spoke about there's no need for heroes. You also spoke about care in leadership. So how can we move away from that sense that, you know, learning technology is an emergency service for staff and for students?
I don't know if we can, actually. I think the pandemic highlighted that complexity is going to keep coming at us. It's part of our job. I would like to think that we could embed some of what we've learned over the pandemic so that we don't, have that rabbit in the headlights moment again. But as Laurie mentioned, we don't want to think about another pandemic, but it probably is coming. And where I was working before, there's been natural disaster bursaries since 2016. The unexpected happens all the time. So there is, I think, always going to be a need for some kind of emergency response. I did touch a little bit on business continuity planning, and I think every institution should be revisiting those plans at the moment from the top down and thinking about where learning technology fits in that business continuity piece. I was working in a fully online university, so it was a different scenario to many colleagues, but I think that is a space that we should be revisiting. But I think that don't be a hero bit on a personal level. We all feel responsible for our work because we care about it deeply. We care about education, we care about students, we care about the communities we work in. But we also have to remember to care for ourselves. And I think that's how you strike the balance. I don't think the work does get easier. I think what you have to do is learn to care for yourself. And every single one of the quotes I've used today come from books or thinkers or people who give me inspiration, who feed or nourish my soul in some way. So take that time and make sure you look after yourself.
Thank you. And before we pick another question, I just want to point out that here on the side of the stage is the meeting ID. So if you go to vvox.up and just put the numbers in, you'll be able to post your own comments and questions in there. And I can see that there's a few more comments, so maybe we'll have one exceptionally thought-provoking keynote. Not only to hear a journey, but to leave us with questions to consider in our own practice.
Thank you. I really did worry that it would be a total bummer of a way to start the conference because it's been quite a few years of complexity.
We have some more questions, so I might pick the one with the fairy tale here. So the question says, which fairy tale do you think we're looking at the moment for learning technologies? I like that question. I hope we can put you on the spot a little bit with this one.
I like that question a lot. Let's talk about the fairy tale that is artificial intelligence, which, as somebody once said to me, was a bad choice of words sometime back in the 1950s or 60s. I think I didn't touch on ChatGPT and generative AI because honestly there is enough to be talking about. But I think, I hope this one has a happy ending, but I think the kind of collective madness that we're in at the moment says something about our digital capability as institutions. I wrote an article for an organisation in Canada where I described our approach to digital change as panicking wildly on a 2 to 3 year cycle. And, at an institutional level, not the people in this room, obviously. You're the ones they come to when the panic sets in. But I think that's, beyond any specific learning technologies, I think that's the piece that we have to work on, is how do we build into our normal business and practice this constant evolution and change of technology, and how do we build critical appreciation of those technologies into our institutions. I am deeply, deeply troubled by generative AI. I'm troubled about its environmental impacts. I'm troubled about the labour practices behind it. I'm troubled by the large-scale theft of IP that's behind it. But it also can't be ignored. It is in our world now, and we can't make it go away. It is the wolf that's going to eat grandma if we let it. So we've got to develop that digital capability in the institution to really be able to critically appraise this stuff, not just panic when it comes at us like generative AI seems to have. But I kind of hope it's a bad fairy tale and it goes away as well.
Thank you. I think we've got time for at least 2 more questions. So there is one around teams and senior leaders. So let's pick that one up, because you've mentioned about your journey from, all different types of management into more seniorship. It's the other question around being part of teams. So thank you for your thoughts around motivating a team. Tricky here. Do you have any suggestions for motivating, and I think that's probably a polite word, more senior leaders to be on side with your priorities?
What we euphemistically call managing upwards, I think. I've been genuinely lucky in my career, actually, to work for and with senior leaders who are the kinds of people who listen and want to lean on the expertise in their teams. So I've had the space to talk to people about why I think what I think, and they've been willing to let me run with it. But I think in general terms, and this is probably going to sound quite trite, you have to understand their jobs and you have to understand their pressures. Part of why I stepped into senior leadership roles was, a sense of, we go on about senior management this, senior management that, and then at some level, if you don't like it, get on and do it yourself and see if you can do it better. And it's been a huge learning experience for me to understand all the ways in which senior leaders are pushed and pulled in institutions, and pushed and pulled by external forces as well. And I mentioned some of them political, some of them environmental, whatever. There's a lot coming at people. So I think understanding where they're at, what their priorities are, what they need to move, and then how can you align your work with that, or occasionally explain why they might be missing a trick somewhere. They need to think about something else. But I think understanding the pressures that senior leaders are under and trying to align your work rather than kind of fight for attention. Try to give them something to say yes to, basically.
Well, many of you have given a thumbs up to this question, so let's think a little bit more about leadership. So how has the experience of being a leader, particularly in the last few years, changed your perspective on leading people?
I don't think it has. But I think what it's done is it's made me double down on what I believe in even harder. I feel when I was young and stupid, I burned out a little bit. And I feel lucky, actually, for that experience, because it happened at a time when the stakes were a lot lower. You know, I believed I could do everything, and I worked myself into the ground. And that's why I come back to that building resilience and leading by developing others. Also, I'm really great at starting things, not so good at finishing them. And so if I build a team, I can build a team of people who are good at finishing things. And then we can get stuff done. So I think, you know, truly understanding that people who are different to you can really bring something to the plate that you can't, and be completely okay with that. Use that, as I said, as your absolute superpower. And if there's one thing I've maybe got more strong on over the last few years, it's bring the student voice into the room. Bring students into the room, put them at the table, give them equal weight at the table. It takes a little time to do that. You need to build trust. You need to build those relationships. But oh boy, there's nothing like bringing a supplier into the room and getting them to do a demo when you've got a student in the room with you. Because all of those lazy stereotypes that they want to spit out during their presentation, they suddenly have to swallow down, and they have to answer directly to the students they're talking about. So I don't think it's changed so much as it's helped me really double down on that point about teams, diversity, and, you know, authenticity. Who can bring authentic experience into the room that you don't have?
Well, bring your AIM game tomorrow, people, because there's a student panel for the keynote in the morning. So we're walking that walk as well as talking that talk. We have one more question here from the audience, and it is about burnout. And that is a topic that you've mentioned. So, you know, it is a real thing nowadays in our field. How can organizations build in support for colleagues at risk of becoming overwhelmed? There's so much going on.
Yeah, not mindfulness over your lunchtime, probably not yoga over your lunchtime either. Nothing in your lunchtime maybe, except what you want to eat. I think there's a tension in here because, not to put my lefty hat on, but, you know, ultimately we're all selling our labour for pay. Organisations, academic institutions being no different, will take that, and they'll take as much of it as you will give them. I think academic institutions are, and public sector in general, are much better at creating a more humane work environment. I think that you probably need to help shape some of that and help your organisations understand what works. Probably not mindfulness over lunchtime, as I said, and provide feedback rather than just kind of, you know, opt out of stuff if it doesn't work. But I think also you need to support your colleagues and not assume that your organisations can always do this work for you. Especially in large institutions, it's a bit difficult to see what's going on sometimes. And speaking up is a really difficult thing to do, especially as a woman working in IT. And it can have a material effect on your career. That's why when I left Athabasca, I was really explicit about I was leaving because I needed to take time out for my health and well-being. And I wanted to model that very, very intentionally, that that's an okay thing to do, that that's a position of power, not a position of weakness. So yeah, engage with your institutions, try and help shape that stuff if you can. Don't just make snarky comments like I did a moment ago, but support your colleagues. Don't assume that everything can be seen, and create that environment where it's safe for people to step away when they need to.
Thank you. I know we have a lot of questions and comments, and I know you'll be with us for the whole of the conference, and hopefully people will come. But I just wanted to give you an opportunity to close your keynote, to share any more reflections you have on openness. This is a thread that runs through all of your work. I know it's something you are technically and ethically and practically passionate about. Do you want to leave us with some closing thoughts on the open aspect of why that's important?
Why is open important? Because ultimately, I think that we should own our own institutions. And I think that the digital transformation narrative is being used to extract money and our labour and our time through data and other forms from our institutions. It's happening in the healthcare system as well. And I think that particularly open source is a way to do innovation. And when I talk about the decolonial context as well, it's really important in those contexts that you're not stuck with technology that just has a Western Eurocentric view of the world and a Western Eurocentric view of what knowledge is. So, we often talk about open in terms of things like Creative Commons, and that breaks down when you get into Indigenous cultures and Indigenous knowledge. So I love open. I think open source is super important because it's a way of putting power back into the hands of those kinds of communities to build something that looks different to the open maybe that I think about. It's ultimately about being our own institutions. And as I was preparing for this, I watched Amber Thomas's keynote from a couple of years ago, which is well worth watching. Everything Amber says is smart. But she talked about the public sector as being the home of innovation. We've been sold this narrative that innovation comes from the private sector, and she had an excellent keynote on how that's just total garbage and how lots of it has come from within the sector. So I have hope, and I think open is how we do it.
Well, on that note, please put your hands together one more time to show your appreciation for Henri Scott. We do have a coffee break for refreshments now. There's water fountains available on all floors, and sessions resume at midday. So we've given you a little bit extra time for the break this morning so you can find your next room presenter. Please do enjoy your day with us, and see you all later today. Thank you.